You're only as old as your spine is a very famous ancient Chinese proverb, which is ironic since spinal mobility is one of the most neglected parts when it comes to working on your mobility in general. Even though working on your spinal mobility has an immense impact on the rest of your body, which is why today we're going to go through a progression, a tier list, so to speak, of spinal mobility exercises that of course include hip and shoulder mobility as well, starting with some very easy, very beginner-friendly exercises anyone can replicate at home, to some pretty advanced stuff. So if you're ready, let's go have some fun. Starting with a very relaxed mobilization of our spine before we actually start putting some pressure on it by simply pushing our hips back and swaying from one side to the other, releasing any sort of discomfort we might have surrounding our lumbar spine, our hip flexors, our hip joints and shoulders in general, before we move our upper body forward again, lengthening our entire spine, rounding it as much as possible, holding for a second before we simply push back again slowly in a controlled manner and sway once again from one side to the other, relaxing, enjoying the release of any sort of tightness. Cat-cow, or the switch between complete spinal flexion, the rounding of the spine and the lengthening of the spinal musculature, into spinal extension, flexing our spinal musculature, especially our erectors or our lumbar spinal muscles, is one of the most accessible and best exercises you can start adding to your routine. This way we can start increasing our range of motion and our control when it comes to spinal extension and spinal flexion, and we have a nice addition of shoulder and hip mobility as well. And after every exercise, we're gonna push our hips back and move back into our swaying position for a bit of relaxation. Combining posterior chain strength with anterior chain flexibility, especially for our abdominals and our hip flexors, we will start extending our arms, elevating our body, while actively flexing every single muscle in our backside. So our arms are only helping us elevate further up while actively pushing our hips towards the floor until we lengthen our anterior chain completely, always trying to make sure that our hips stay on the floor while only our upper body starts elevating. And if you cannot extend your arms fully, do not worry about it. Over time, as you progress when it comes to spinal extension, this will become far more comfortable and your range of motion will increase drastically. And of course, we're going to push back again into our starting position and sway from one side to the other, releasing any sort of tightness we might have built. Now moving to another very important function of our spine, which is rotation. In a laying down position, elevating one leg, moving laterally to the outside, bringing our toes to the floor, and then actively pushing both shoulders towards the ground and pulling our knee in the elevated leg upwards towards the ceiling, building as much of an active rotation as we can muster, holding for a second or two before we reverse and move into the other direction. This way adding a lot of hip flexor flexibility, quad and abdominal flexibility, while we are strengthening the muscles in our posterior chain, specifically our glutes and our spinal erectors, and then once again back into our relaxation position and swaying for a couple of times from one side to the other. This video is sponsored by you liking this video, subscribing to this channel, watching the whole thing. Hell, maybe you will even leave a comment below. Is all the sponsorship I need. You are the only reason I make those videos. And now focusing on opening up our anterior chain in our upper body by elevating one side while our other arm is extended, lengthening our deltoids and our pectorals, releasing tightness or shortness in those muscles and the surrounding tissue, so we can start increasing our thoracic mobility as we progress through those exercises, while having enough flexibility in the muscles surrounding our spine so we can go through those exercises way more comfortably. Simply pull one hand closer to your upper body and start extending it while your other arm stays in full contact with the floor. Only go as far as you can, of course, without experiencing any pain in your joints. Now, a slight discomfort in the muscles you are stretching will always be present if you're doing everything correctly. However, we do not want to have active pain in our joints or in our muscles in general. With our finisher, of course, pushing back, opening up our shoulders forward, and once again swaying to the left and right side. Now, while the last exercise was pushing us more and more into extension with our rotation, this time we want to move into as much of a flexion or rounding of our spine while adding some rotations, including our shoulders and hips, by simply swaying our hips all the way to one side, touching the floor if possible, and then swaying them to the other side while keeping our knees up, adding a lot of strength to our core musculature for actively keeping our spine as rounded as possible. And once you notice that you're falling back into extension, which is very likely going to happen, move back into the starting position, round your back as much as you can once more, and repeat for a handful of times. And of course, back into our relaxation position and swaying. And now combining complete posterior chain strength by actively pushing our body towards the floor while moving forward. And then, once we elevate our upper body, complete anterior chain strength to round our back while pushing backwards, basically moving through a circular motion in our entire spine, keeping as close to the floor as we can, requiring now a lot of strength from our entire body basically to move through this exercise in a slow and very controlled fashion, trying to make sure that our chest touches the floor throughout most of the movement, going into complete extension in our spine before we start pushing back, raising our knees, activating our entire anterior chain, and back into our relaxation position, of course. Now taking the classic downward dog exercise, where in a quadruped position with extended arms and legs, we push our chest towards the floor, basically lengthening our entire posterior chain in our lower and anterior chain in our upper body. We'll start adding steps, stepping backwards with our feet, pushing down further, even further than we did before, holding for a second or two, and then stepping forward with our hands and doing the same thing until we are as close to the floor with our chest as possible, and then reversing the whole thing by stepping closer with our hands towards our feet, holding for a second or two, closer with our feet towards our hands, and repeating this a handful of times, stepping forward and backwards, switching from more to less stretch, more extension in our back to more flexibility in our lower body, and playing around with this exercise, finding out where the end of our range of motion is and where we start experiencing pain, which is the exact point where we need to step it back a little bit. And of course, knees down, pushing back, now rounding our spine as much as we can, and once again, left to right. Now switching into a lunging position, we're going to add the next foundational function of our spine, which is lateral flexion, and combining that with rotation as well, an exercise that includes a lot of core strength. Our spinal erectors and our core are basically working in conjunction with each other to push us forward and backwards and rotate our body, and bringing our elbow as close to our front knee as we can, and then the same elbow as close to our back leg as we can. This exercise feels absolutely amazing, opens up your entire spine, takes it through a long range of motion into every function it basically goes through, and requires surprisingly a lot more strength than you would think, so try it out for yourself. And in the same starting position facing a wall, we can start increasing our range of motion when it comes to this lateral flexion, trying to push our chest against said wall and moving forward and backwards with extended arms, pulling our upper body as close to the floor into both directions, which can be pretty close as you progress, especially when it comes to your hip mobility, getting better with those exercises as well in conjunction with your spine, helping us stretch our obliques, our latissimus, our shoulders, and even our triceps the longer this movement becomes, and strengthening our core to pull us into both directions, especially once again our obliques and our spinal erectors, basically including every single muscle in our upper back as well, for good measure. And now adding a little bit more complexity as well as rotation, we will now do the same thing with our back towards the wall, all the way forward, all the way backwards, and then moving back into a neutral upward position with our upper body before we switch into our chest towards the wall, and then going through the same thing again. Now actively lengthening all the same muscles as we did with the exercise before, and then switching to lengthening more and more of our anterior chain once our back is in full contact with the wall behind us, and we're always actively trying to push back against that wall, now having lateral flexion, rotation, as well as a little bit of spinal flexion and extension as well, with an absolutely amazing amazing bonus at opening up our hips, especially the further we start moving backwards with our upper body closer and closer to the hind leg, lengthening our hip flexors and our quads, which will come in very handy for all kinds of mobility work. Now moving up a little bit in difficulty, starting in a handstand position with our legs bent close to a wall, we're going to focus on opening up our chest and shoulders by starting to push our chest towards the wall, lengthening our pectorals, our anterior delts and our abdominals, and helping us move into more and more of thoracic extension, holding, strengthening our entire back, in conjunction of course with our arms, our shoulders and our cores to help us hold this upside down position for longer and longer periods of time. So if you're working on your handstand, this will also help you get there and also help you with the necessary upper body mobility to hold a perfect handstand. And finally, from the same starting position, combining a lot of thoracic mobility with a lot of lumbar mobility, lengthening our entire anterior chain in our lower abdominals and our hip flexors towards the upper part of our anterior chain, our chest and our deltoids, and now moving through a lot of thoracic extension to a lot of lumbar extension, back into thoracic extension, and moving from hip extension to hip flexion, back into hip extension, and so on. Now combining full body strength with full body control and helping us with gravity to push deeper and deeper into those extensions in both ways. And there you go. We've practically covered everything your spine has to go through properly, from extension to flexion, from rotations to lateral flexion and extension. When it comes to programming, just start with 3 or 4 of the exercises you are comfortably able to do. As you progress through the difficulty ladder, you can start adding another more advanced exercise and another more advanced exercise. And if you can do this 2 times a week, 15 to 20 minutes, that is more than enough to start building an amazing foundation of spinal mobility. But once again, that's all the time I've left for you today. However, we do stuff like that very regularly, which means I'll probably see you soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo. Peace out.